Alright, today I want to talk over a bit on damage profiles, both in like a general mage sense and in an overall WoW sense. What I mean when I say damage profile is basically just how your class or spec does damage. I see a lot of people not really understanding the importance of damage profiles, and a lot of people just not understanding how they work. I've heard for example, people mention damage profiles as just classes doing more damage than others, and I think it's actually pretty important. So I think the best way to go over this is maybe paint. Alright, let me just draw up something real quick. Let's separate 3 little spots for each spec, and I'll draw a nice little picture. Frost. And then we'll do Arcane and Fire. Arcane. Fire. Whoops. Fire. Alright. So, I guess the easiest way to do this will just be to list the strengths of like each specs damage profile. So start with consistent versus burst. Frost is one of the most consistent specs in the game right now. The goal of Frost is to basically just have 100% uptime on Icy Veins, and what I mean by that is there's not very many peaks, there's not very many lows, it's just all around pretty steady medium to high throughput. Not as high burst as other specs. And speaking of the other specs, Arcane and Fire are both extremely bursty. The goal of these specs is to use their CDs and try to get as much damage in a short window as possible. And outside of that damage window, they will be setting up for the next burst. So it looks like a giant spike, and then after the spike it goes down a bit. All right, so what else is there? Next, let's go over cleave. So Frost has great cleave through splitting ice, has great funnel through frozen orb and the legendary freezing winds. Basically, with more targets, you're able to generate more damage through your frozen orbs and generating more ice lances, which is good. Arcane also has sort of the same thing through their cleave with Resonance and Arcane Harmony together. I guess we'll just put that all in one line, why not? So basically, they stack up their legendary to max stacks, and if there's 5 targets total, then each barrage is going to do more damage through Resonance. So that is also sort of a funnel thing right there. And Fire. Alright, so Fire used to be the best in the game by far, actually, at cleave. If you guys can remember from last expansion, Fire was pretty ridiculous for raids. Basically, you just hit one target and generate a huge dot that spreads for free to nearby targets. I think just that alone made Fire very, very appealing for raiding scenarios. And it did get nerfed to not be spread by just passively anymore. It now gets spread by Phoenix Flames, which makes it so the cleave aspect of Fire is basically dead. So you have to choose between single target and AoE through your combusts, which, to be fair, both of those are very, very powerful for Fire. So, Fire is the only spec for Mage that I won't have cleave as a strength first toolkit. It's just going to be single target and AoE. Okay, and I think I'm going to add one more little section, which is basically uptime. Frost specifically needs very, very high uptime to maintain Icy Veins. If there's ever any forced downtime, Frost won't be seen very good there. So requires high uptime. Alright, Arcane. Arcane is a spec that only really requires uptime during their cooldowns. Outside of it, it's not as bad as Frost. So I don't know, requires uptime during CDs. Bad if or I guess interrupted during them. Something like that. And for fire, generally able to maintain high uptime in CDs. Uptime lets you get more CDR for combust. Okay, I don't like how the whole screen moved when I edited the actual line. That is a bit annoying. All right, we'll move it back. All right, so those are the main few things I want to go over. So the first topic is consistency versus burst. Where is each one better? An argument I heard before Sanctum of Domination was that if Frost and Arcane are at all ever close to each other, then Arcane should be better because it is more bursty and burst damage is always more favorable for progress. I don't agree with that. So I can agree that burst damage is very important for progress. For example, if you needed me a DPS check on an ad that needs to die, a big example of this in the past was Feta Devour. You had to kill the little, I don't remember what they're called, I think pustules. You had to kill those very quickly. So burst specs are really good at that. But I think that is only like required for a raid scenario if that spec is the best at the game for burst. So currently that is not the case. Mage is not the best at bursts over a long period of time, like let's say over their cooldowns. Venthyr Moonkin is. So Venthyr Moonkin is seen very desirable for things like the phylactery on Kel'Thuzad. You really want to just optimize damage in a short period of time to deal with that. Boss. Whereas like Arcane down there wouldn't really be good with that sort of burst. Arcane's burst is extremely compacted into very few seconds, which could be good. Not good in this raid. It could be good though for some things that needed to die extremely quick. It would have been good for Feta Devour, for example, if there was a boss like that this year. Alright, so where is consistent damage better? The best example I can think of is probably like Queen Ashara from Eternal Palace. If you guys remember that fight last expansion, basically in P2 there were 3 mini boss style ads, and you had to have enough damage for each mini boss to beat their own rages, or else you'd wipe. So to kind of highlight this, imagine if every single class in your game pop CDs, or in your raid, pop CDs on the first ad. It would easily die, but the second ad, you'd have no CDs left, and you'll probably wipe to the enrage. Where consistent damage specs come in to play is they lower the amount of damage evenly on each ad so that you have an easier time to make the DPS checks. So if you didn't have consistent DPS specs, the main example I'm talking about for Queen Ashara was Shadow Priest at the time. It was the best all around, just had damage all the time. If you didn't have that, you'd have to inefficiently move like half of your cooldowns off of the first ad to the second ad, and those half of the raid are just sitting on cooldowns for a while, and that's inefficient. They're not living up to their full class's potential. Whereas if you add in a few Shadow Priests, then the DPS requirement for all 3 ads goes down because you have even damage, so you can take less classes CDs off the first ad, and then you can have a more even spread. So that's like probably the biggest example of how a consistent damage profile can be really, really important. So generally my thoughts on burst versus consistent damage is for a raid scenario, you want the best of both, and that is what you should really aim for. Specifically for general purpose stuff, like for Mage, it doesn't really matter for an overall damage. Usually you're just going to want to go with whatever has the highest overall, but in In a larger aspect, or what do you say, the bigger scope of things, bigger picture, um, it can matter. It can matter. Like if you don't go prepared into a boss with most of the times it's a consistent damage profile, then it could actually be pretty bad. It could actually be pretty bad. All right. Next point is cleave. So Arcane and Frost are pretty similar in like the funnel aspect. They both gain a lot from having extra targets, single target wise. They're a little bit different. Arcane is more bursty, so if ads are going to live for a shorter amount of time, Arcane's probably going to be better than Frost. Whereas if the ads live longer time, then Frost is going to be better than Arcane. And Arcane's funnel per se goes through its cleave. They happen at the same time. Frost has more consistent cleave all the time. Doesn't really drop off if there are several targets. Okay, so for Fire's single targets and AoE, it is largely just one or the other. You can't really get both. No cleave, so it's pretty inefficient that way. But in the past, if it's tuned higher, it's still really good. Combustion's a very powerful cooldown, and it's up a lot of the time due to kindling and things like shifting power. So it can still be good in that sense. All right, the next thing, uptime. So Frost is a spec that can struggle pretty hard if there's ever forced uptime. Something like Council Blood, whenever the dance happens, you basically can't do anything. And something to keep in mind is during downtime, like that, is you're getting value from your cooldowns coming back up, and burst specs value a lot from that, assuming they're actually on cooldown. Up to a certain point, like you don't get any value, right? Whenever they come up, you stop losing, or you stop gaining value. Sorry. So a spec like Frost, where you try to keep your cooldowns up all the time, are gonna lose value from downtime like that, unless you're also gaining cooldown recovery. But generally, downtime is good for classes with strong CDs. And specifically with Arcane, requiring uptime during CDs can be really bad if there's a fight with constant movement where you can't really sit and plant for 10 seconds consistently whenever your cooldowns are up. It could end up being a problem. Luckily, Arcane has tools like Presence of Mind to make it a bit easier to get your damage off, but there's still a lot of scenarios, specifically with this raid I've seen, where you just try to pop stuff on cooldown and it lines up pretty badly and then you regret it, so you have to inefficiently hold them for a bit, which is never great for a spec like Arcane. And with Fire specifically, they are able to move completely free during their cooldowns, which is extremely valuable. Also, I guess I could add this. Searing Touch Execute movement is really nice for Fire. Just generally the hardest parts, most hectic parts are at the end of fights, and being able to have free movement during that is pretty valuable. And of course you want to make sure you have high uptime as Fire as well to get cooldown reduction for Combust. But usually that isn't a problem, because if you're not able to hit something, then you're also just having it passively recharge, which is fine, as Combust is a powerful CD. Okay, so with all this in mind, what is the conclusion? So, in my opinion, overall damage is extremely important, and a lot of the times, you want to look at sims, but I wouldn't really say that's the end-all be-all of how well a spec's going to perform. For example, like let's look at Sledgefish from last year. Just because a spec sims well in single target doesn't mean they're going to perform well on a fight like that. There's damage ups on a very specific intervals at 1 minute. So specs that take advantage of burst windows really well are going to do really well in a fight like that. I think when specifically preparing for raid, it's extremely important to not lose sight of what the fights actually make you do. and to prepare for that. Not just look at, all right, if I'm turreting for 5 minutes straight, how is my spec gonna look? There's a lot of factors like cleave, funnel, downtime um that all add up to deciding what's going to be good on a fight. And instead of looking at a sim number, I think instead it's better to look at what each spec is good at for a fight and just look at how they're tuned, and then you're able to make a more advanced decision at that point. I also get asked a bunch about what I think is going to be good for dungeons this season. I haven't done like high key pushing this season, and I don't really plan to. So, I don't have like actual experience in that, but you can just look at damage profiles and see what's going to be good historically. Consistent and bursty specs have usually wanted to be together in the same party. Stuff like Outlaw Rogue, BM Hunter being the consistent, efficient damage that's always up. And then you want to pair it with like a Fire Mage, Windwalker Monk with very, very strong CDs that are able to kill packs quickly. So in dungeons, I could see all three of the mage specs being good, depending on how you want to play. Like if your group's gonna pull big, fire is gonna be good because of the AoE, uncapped AoE, whereas Arcane's main damage is concentrated into 5 targets through Arcane Barrage, but it's still not the worst with Arcane Explosion, whereas Frost is just going to have damage up all the time. So it just really depends on how you play. Unfortunately, you can't really swap between all 3 of them due to covenants. Hopefully that'll change one day, but yeah, all 3 are probably really solid. Don't know for sure. I haven't been playing this season, but I'd assume you could play whatever and it would be fine. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Just really wanted to make this video because I feel like damage profiles aren't a thing that are talked enough in this game. I think they're pretty important to look at, specifically for mages and obviously any other class. I think if you ever want to plan for what's going to be good for raid, I think you definitely want to look at what your class is good at, not what sims good on a patchwork 1 minute or 5 minute fight. I think that's pretty unrealistic for most fights scenarios. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you guys want to catch me live, I stream on Twitch almost every day at twitch.tv/Imfiredup. I also read all the comments, so if you guys have any suggestions for video ideas, make sure to put them down there. I'll read them. But yeah, besides that, I think I'm gonna call it there. So I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next video. Bye.